luxury beliefs are ideas and opinions that confer status on the upper class while inflicting costs on the lower classes. And a core feature of a luxury belief is that the believer is sheltered from the consequences of his or her belief. I've achieved all of these things and so on and so forth, but, toward the end of the book, I acknowledge that, I would have traded it all just to have had a more normal upbringing.
Welcome to the show today. I am so thrilled for this show. We have a quick mini series of 2 episodes that I'm doing. I'm calling this series the Society Check-In. This is where we want to learn from some experts and researchers and just get a check on what we need to know about trends in society right now. What do we need to know to live our own lives well? And what do we need to know as leaders, as colleagues at work, as friends, and most importantly, as parents or grandparents or aunts? What's going on out there? What do we need to know? And what do we need to do? That's what we're going to tackle with the next 2 episodes. I'm so honored to bring Rob Henderson to the show this week. I've followed him for a long time. I was fascinated by his journey. I don't want to give it away. We'll talk about it together. But as soon as I saw he had a book launching, I was excited to reach out and basically beg him to join the show. He brings a really unique perspective about what's going on in society trend-wise with the culture, and that's very, very important for us to know. I've taken a ton of Rob's work and writings and had conversations with my son about it to enlighten them and give them a fresh perspective on some of the things that Rob and I are going to talk about today. He's coined the phrase luxury beliefs that you'll hear about today, but you will soon hear them in broader culture. In fact, you'll remember this show and go, I remember hearing Rob talk about that on Allie's show back in the day. It is a game changer in terms of societal messaging, and it's important to understand it as parents and people who influence other people. I think you're going to love it. And after we talk with Rob, it's time for coaching, of course. Today, I'm bringing you a quick tip. It's a mental reframe that's going to help you keep in mind the truth of who you are, your power, and your ability to make good things happen. I mean, it's a big promise, but you know me, I back up the big promises. In the recommendation, I'm going to tell you the app that you have to have on your phone right now. You need it. And without further ado, I am honored to bring on my new friend, Rob. Rob, I am thrilled to have you on my show. I have been more excited about your memoir than any memoir I got my hands on in years. Here it is for everyone watching on YouTube, Troubled. I am a subscriber to your Substack, and so you would give chapters. I remember chapter 1 came out and then chapter 2 came out, and I'm staying up late at night reading these chapters, excited for the next chapter. And it is just a tremendous memoir of your life. You started, you went basically from foster care to the military to a really, really prestigious school. I don't want to tell your whole story, but did you ever imagine in a million years that your life was so phenomenal and so interesting that you would write a book about it?
It's going to sound immodest, but I figured at some point, by the time I got to Yale after, the foster homes and all of the sort of chaotic life experiences I'd had before I fled when I was 17, enlisted in the military, then went off to Yale on the GI Bill. I did at one point step back and think like, yeah, I have had a kind of varied experiences and I've learned a lot, and for my relatively young age, and figured at some point down the road, maybe in middle-aged or older, when I reach 50 or 60 or something, maybe I'll consider writing some kind of memoir or autobiography or something. But yeah, by the time I graduated and then went off to grad school for my PhD, forces aligned, and I was starting to get some interest from literary agents and taking meetings with publishers, and figured I should go ahead and write it. But it did come as a shock that it happened so soon. But in hindsight, I'm glad I did it this way. I did feel, again, I felt a bit immodest writing a book. I was 30 when I started writing my book. And, I was still young enough that my childhood memories were very fresh still. I
Mm-hmm.
could still remember, the people in my life at that point are still alive and they still have very fresh memories, so I could speak with them about what happened. Whereas, when you get older and you write books, like, people tend to have a habit of dying or leaving or getting, sort of um, distance, distance and everything grows apart. And so it becomes harder to piece everything together. But for me, it was actually pretty easy uh, in a sort of practical sense. Emotionally, it was difficult, but it was easy in the sense that I could communicate with people and remember things pretty easily.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the amount of detail that you could bring in from your childhood, especially given how horribly traumatic your younger years were going from foster home to foster home. I found you on Twitter years ago, and what really caught my attention is you were breaking down social class in such an interesting way. And for me, I grew up poor. I was on one side of my family the first person to go to college, and it for me, in my formative years, in the middle of middle school, I was plucked out of um, public school and got to go to the hoitiest elite school in my city on scholarship for a few years. And it was, yes, a little traumatic being the poor kid at a school where people's dads land their helicopter and
Hmm.
on the school grounds to meet with the headmaster. But at the same time, I'm so glad that I went because it opened my eyes to a whole new world that I wouldn't have been exposed to at all. And my world
Wow.
would have been so limited had I not had that exposure. And it's going from a, a school where the majority of kids were in the lower class to all of a sudden a kids where all the kids are in the upper class and going, wait a minute, we're living completely different lives. And so much of what I believed about what people could do and what people could achieve is expanded, and it was so limited before. And you talk about all these things so clearly. That's what I really, really loved. I think had I not been plucked out of that school and put into that different school, I wouldn't be where I am today because I wouldn't
Hmm.
know what I could do. And you had such an interesting, yeah, so many interesting parts of your book where whether it's someone that you worked for when you were in high school or someone in the military or someone who reached out and had you write an article after college which got the eye of publishers. I think there we can look back and go, this experience shaped me. Thank goodness I had this mentor. Thank goodness I had people push me. And I wanted to have you on the show to talk about the importance of talking about these things and the importance of understanding what is truly helpful for people and what's harmful. And I think the first tweet I ever saw of yours was talking about luxury beliefs.
Hmm.
Speaking of things that are helpful and things that are harmful, will you dive into
Hmm.
what a luxury belief is really quickly?
Yeah, well, by the time I arrived at college, I was 25 years old, and I'd spent my life in various states of poverty or disorder, and then I'm at this fancy, expensive university. I was there on the GI Bill, and I was just in this kind of fish out of water situation, and this idea started to take shape in my mind. I didn't actually coin the term luxury beliefs until grad school
Mm-hmm.
later, but the sort of seeds of the idea were planted during those early experiences in college. And eventually I came to give this definition. Luxury beliefs are ideas and opinions that confer status on the upper class while inflicting costs on the lower classes. And a core feature of a luxury belief is that the believer is sheltered from the consequences of his or her belief. And there are different sociological frameworks and theories and empirical findings in psychology that I get into in the book in Troubled. But the short version is that the elites, the sort of this tip top sort of rarefied segment of society, they've always strived for recognition and distinction in ways to separate themselves from the masses. Historically, it's been through luxury goods. Back in the day, it was top hats and monocles and expensive evening gowns and attending lavish events and those things still exist to this day, but goods have become a noisier indicator of one's position in society. And so my claim is that now it's through beliefs, it's through holding sort of newfangled, unorthodox views that are at odds with conventional opinion. And so, if most people hold one view and you want to indicate that you're not a normal person, but you went to an expensive university and you have the kind of job where you have a lot of leisure time and you can absorb the latest fashionable opinions and viewpoints and so on, things like defunding the police, or there are other examples, decriminalizing hard drugs, or things that common sense would indicate, is this really the best idea? But if you're, if you've attended an elite university and you've sort of, or you just spend a lot of time around people who have been educated at such places, you can find ways to, do the intellectual acrobatics to justify this to yourself. And, in the book, I cite study after study and statistic after statistic indicating that people with the most education and the highest levels of income are the most supportive of these kinds of views, whereas people who are, hold less levels of formal education and earn less money are much more opposed to them. And yeah, this is my way of understanding one aspect of class. And, I've written about class at length in various essays and so forth, but the book, I speak about it a lot.
Yeah, there's one part. Is it weird if I read to you out of your own book?
That's all right.
I hope it's not weird because I'm about to. Here, I love this paragraph. You said, a 2020 survey found that the richest Americans showed the strongest support for defunding the police, while the poorest Americans reported the lowest support, which, hello, of course, because they're the ones who have to deal with it. Throughout the remainder of that year and into 2021, murder rates throughout the U.S. soared as a result of defunding policies, officers retiring early or quitting, and police departments struggling to recruit new members after the luxury belief class cultivated an environment of loathing toward law enforcement. And you share how it is these luxury beliefs that make the elites look elite, right? To differentiate themselves. It is the lower classes and it's the poor who bear the brunt of this. It goes in line with, fathers aren't needed in the home. Fathers aren't important to family. But if you look at upper class families, they're normally married. So it is all of these crazy things where so many of us, it feels like we've woken up in the past few years and gone, has the world lost their mind? Like, of course, fathers are important to a family. And of course, you want to have policies that strengthen families. And of course, you want police to handle crime because the crime tends to be in the poor areas committed against people who are poor. It's not like we have massive crime in the same areas where people are going, yes, defund the police. It's ridiculous. So once you put it into such a perfect phrase and explained it so well, it was eye-opening for me. We use the luxury belief term in our household all the time. We'll go, oh, that's a luxury belief. But it's important to talk about it because it does seem like in the past few years everyone has lost their mind just from common sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the way that the people who promote these views actually live their lives, I mean, where do they live? They live in places that have low crime, that have police departments nearby, and if they don't, they have the resources to hire. And there were stories about this in 2020 of affluent neighborhoods hiring off-duty police officers and private security guards and people who would patrol these areas. And so, yeah, what does their behavior say? That they actually want to get away from crime, that they want to be protected from crime. If you look at marriage rates in the country, the people who are publicly the strongest skeptics of marriage, of having a father in the home, of family stability, well, they're the most likely to actually get married, the least likely to get divorced or have children out of wedlock. And I go into all the stats in the book about how, there's this large mismatch between what people say versus what they do. And it's this kind of strange form of duplicity and hypocrisy. And it's, and sadly, elites, people who, roughly they go to the kinds of, selective colleges and earn lots of money and occupy influential positions in culture and economics and policy, they wield disproportionate power in terms of what the culture looks like, the discourse that we partake in, the policies that are implemented. The vast majority of Americans in general, regardless of income, the majority of Americans were very much opposed to defund policies. But the elites were, in many cities, in favor of it. And as a result, there were defund policies in many cities in the country. And yeah, homicide rates increased, violent crime rates increased, and the targets were primarily poor people. And look, like a poor person is far more likely to be a victim of a crime than a perpetrator. A person compared to a middle class American, Americans in the lowest income category are 7 times more likely to be victims of robbery, of aggravated assault, 20 times more likely to be victims of sexual assault, far more likely to be victims of homicide or murder. I mean, it's so rare for an upper middle class person to be murdered that when it does happen, like they actually get named and identified in the media, and like a whole article is written about this. Whereas when poor people kill each other, they just get folded into these aggregate statistics. And if a dishwasher gets stabbed somewhere, like they're not gonna get a splashy full page treatment the way that if a tech executive or an investment banker, if they're killed, that becomes a kind of front page news. And so yeah, it's just a really to me it's kind of this repellent and elitist attitude that yeah, it's something that our elites should be more aware of, and that the rest of us would benefit if they sort of took a step back and reflected on their own flaws.
Yeah, and I think it's so important that you've written this book. I think it's important for us to have this conversation because we need to be educated on the facts and what the research says about the results of these policies and the results of luxury beliefs, because there is social pressure to conform. In certain circles, this is what we all believe now. We're not in the Stone Ages. Of course, we don't need men for children to grow up well. What are men good for? And of course, we're defunding the police, or whatever the belief is now, because there's going to be even crazier ones come up in the future. We need to have the data in front of us to go, actually, it's really damaging. You're damaging the people in society who don't have the resources to care for themselves like you do. So it's really important to talk about. For you, what was the most surprising thing about sharing your story and writing this book and getting it out to the world? What did you not expect? It's all pretty fresh since you launched the book.
Okay, so I think the most surprising thing has been how people have connected with it. Even people who didn't grow up poor, people who never lived in foster care, and yet they still find something in the book that spoke to them. I receive emails and messages from people who, they had a parent who was an addict. Maybe they were middle class. They were sort of materially comfortable, but a parent was an alcoholic or an addict, or there was, family secrets and abuse and all this kind of stuff. That still, a lot of it disproportionately occurs in low-income communities, but it still exists. It's kind of around, regardless of where you are on the socioeconomic spectrum. It's less prevalent at the top, but it's still around, and so people are finding those things to connect with. Because that was a worry that I had when I was writing the book. Was like, I have such a strange story and experience, and fortunately, the vast majority of people have never spent any time in foster care. Will they really understand what I'm speaking about? Will they be able to follow along? Will they care or connect with it? And I've been surprised at sort of the varied responses I've had from people who do connect with it. It's been nice I had this conversation the other day with Coleman Hughes on his podcast, and he was telling me how he's spoken about this probably before, about how his mom passed away when he was 18, and how he would tell this story to himself about how this made him stronger, it made him more resilient, and maybe it accounts for why he's become so successful at such a young age. But when he and I were talking, he said that he would give it all back to have his mom again. And this was his way of saying he understood the point of my book, that I've achieved all of these things and so on and so forth. But toward the end of the book, I acknowledge that I would have traded it all just to have had a more normal upbringing. And so people are kind of getting that core message in the book, and yeah, it's been surprising that that people are connecting with it in that way.
That's great. And you found, from lurking on your Twitter page, you found quite a few people who don't want to talk to you about your book for their own reasons, right?
Yeah, I mean it's been interesting to see the response. I mean, the book itself is not political. There was just this review in The Economist I just saw today, and the reviewer, it was a good review, and the reviewer notes that I make no mention of my political orientation or views, and it notes that these are largely just common sense things that I'm describing. But it's a weird thing where common sense can be transgressive. I had this professor at Yale, this historian that I'm still in contact with, who he used to say, he still says that common sense is like air. The higher you go, the thinner it gets. And at some point, when you reach a certain level in society, you become disconnected from reality and you forget common sense. You become detached from it. But yeah, I've seen that bookstores haven't been willing to host me for book tour or book events, and I can't really complain because other people have reached out and I've been able to do book events in other venues. But yeah, it's just a surprise that this book would be considered provocative enough or polarizing enough that certain people or certain organizations wouldn't want to be affiliated with me.
Yeah, it shows how much people are really focused in on their luxury beliefs. For parents who have kids who are getting ready to go off to college and they are going to be inundated with luxury beliefs by professors and everyone else, whether they are going to an Ivy League school or Cambridge like you did, or they're going to a state school, it's coming. What do you suggest? What are some recommendations?
Yeah, well, I think that having, it depends on the circumstances. It always depends on the circumstances, but it would not be a bad idea to get a service job. Get a job where you're working around people, where you're on your feet. Whether it's, I had two jobs in high school. I was a dishwasher and a busboy and a bag boy at a supermarket, and I just had these kinds of jobs where I was interacting with people who, working class people who were clocking in and clocking out and trying to make ends meet. And, if you spend a summer like that, or, get a part-time job while you're in college of just, learning what it's like to be in those positions, then I think you'll be sort of less susceptible to luxury beliefs, which are primarily, promoted and cultivated by people who haven't had those kinds of jobs and haven't been around ordinary people.
That's good. And just knowing the data that the people that are hurt by luxury beliefs are the people in the lower classes, even though it makes people socially feel great.
Yeah, that's a good point too, is to, if you can either sort of dig into the survey data yourself or, find sources where, because, there are ideas that seem intuitive or that we just sort of take at face value. And they may sound good or sound interesting, but it's always worth looking into, okay, well, who's supporting these ideas? Will this actually benefit people? Is this is this a belief held primarily by sort of affluent college educated people, or is it actually held by the communities who we're purporting to to serve and to protect and to advance? And it's too many people. Too many educated people are strangely gullible and naive in the sense that, if it says something in a prestigious legacy media outlet or some prominent expert or something, then people, oh, okay, and it's like, there are sources of information you can go to. There are ways to sort of figure things out for yourself too, which isn't to say like everything the experts say is wrong or everything. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, if you hear something and it sounds potentially suspicious, or it sounds like there could be alternate viewpoints, then it would be worth seeking those other viewpoints or sources of information out.
That's great. Are there any other aspects of this that you find really interesting that we've missed so far?
Other aspects. No, I mean, not really. I guess like the whole experience has been great. As a debut author, and sort of learning how everything works. From pre-order campaigns to bestseller lists, and how to how reviews work and all this stuff. It's been really interesting. Um, and I'm glad I did it. Writing the book was actually hard. It was harder than I expected, but I'm glad I did it. And yeah, the experience has been it's been good.
When I was reading it, I remember thinking, I hope he went to therapy while he wrote this book all over again, because it sounds tough to relive
Yeah.
so much of your experience.
Uh, no, I didn't go to therapy. I mean, this was during the lockdown too. This was 2020, 2021 was when I was reading it, and it was hard. And I remember feeling down some days, especially writing the first 5 or 6 chapters of the book. But I got through it, and you know, I'm I'm not opposed to therapy. I went to therapy. I mean, I talk about it in the book the times that I went, but by the time I wrote it, I was already grad student in Cambridge, and my life was kind of already comfortable, and so I not that I'm ruling it out. Maybe someday I'll go back, but I'm fine for now.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't too traumatic, reliving everything. That's great. Okay, let's have some fun questions.
Mhm.
What about, I think I know what your answer is going to be, a TV show that you're
Oh,
watching?
yeah. Well, I've rewatched this twice now all the way through, but I've been kind of rewatching certain episodes. Mad Men. I think it's probably the second greatest show of all time. I mean, The Sopranos will always be my favorite. I know people argue with me about this, um, but Mad Men is, it's unique. It's also, I mean, there's a lot to learn about social class in
Mm-hmm.
that show as well, because the protagonist Don Draper is kind of a class imposter. He comes from some backwater town in Pennsylvania in the Dust Bowl during the Depression, and he kind of through a series of semi deceitful and crafty maneuvers, manages to land himself at a prestigious advertising agency. And you can sort of see what he knows, what he doesn't know, what he's learning, the kinds of people around him. Pete Campbell, like that dude,
Mm-hmm.
sort of the wasp character who's born to wealth, and his mannerisms and his interactions with the others. And yeah, it's just a really interesting show. um so yeah, I would recommend that for anyone who's interested in social class in particular.
Yeah, I love Mad Men. I've watched it through once. It is on my list to watch through again. It is one of my favorites. And yes, I think there are entire groups of people in the United States who would arm wrestle over Mad Men versus Sopranos being first.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
What about a book that you're recommending others read, other than Troubled, of course?
Right. Oh man, there's a lot of books out. I have this reading list that I've been promoting to, for people who purchase Troubled. You can email me and get a copy of the reading list. Man, okay. So off the top, I'm reading this book now. I'm almost finished with it. It's called Love at Goon Park, which is a weird title. It's actually a bad title, but the book is about Harry Harlow, who was a psychologist in the 1950s. And he's most known, so people who are sort of familiar with psychology, they may know about the cloth mother and wire mother studies with the monkeys, Harlow's famous monkeys. So Harry Harlow was the one who designed those experiments, but this book is about him, his personal life, and his research and his findings, and attachment theory, and kind of everything he learned throughout his research career. And it's not dry, it's not dull, it's very sort of fast paced, and it's very interesting, and it lays out this research in a very sort of readable and accessible way. So Love at Goon Park, and it's weird, like the title, what did they call it? Goon Park it was like this nickname they gave the research lab, And love was ultimately the topic he was interested in studying. Love, attachment. Why do parents love their children? Why do children love their parents? What's the reasoning behind that? Is love, this natural thing? Is it learned? And so on. But anyway, Love at Good Park by Deborah Blum. She's a science journalist, great writer. So yeah, that's a book I'd recommend.
That's great. I love how you threw it in that it's not dry. It's very
Yeah,
important to throw that in.
yeah.
What about a product that you love right now?
So I bought this about 3 or 4 years ago, a reading stand or a book stand. It's essentially a lot of chefs and cooks will use it in their kitchen to prop up their recipe book, their ingredient list, while they're cooking, so they can look at it while they cook. But I bought one just to read books. So you can just put your book there. There are these little kind of knobs that keep the pages down, and so I'll just use that. And it's nice because you don't have to lean your head down to read, or you don't have to prop it up with your hand. You can just read it on the stand. You can put your Kindle up there. I'll read my Kindle on the reading stand too. So if you just Google book stand or reading stand, a lot of options online, and yeah, it's a weird thing. It's a simple thing, but a lot of heavy readers don't have one of those. You'll see them in libraries, but you don't often see them in people's homes.
I think it's a great idea. Not only will it keep your neck from getting sore from always looking down, my thumbs always get tired from holding up heavy books, so that can work for me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to tell everybody, if you love a great memoir, Troubled is phenomenal. For this to be your first book and to write so beautifully and so captivatingly, congratulations. But it's an amazing memoir, and for people who are interested in social psychology, it's really terrific. It's terrific on so many different levels. So congratulations. I can't wait to see all the books that you're going to write in the future. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, you can follow me on X at Rob K. Henderson and Substack, robkhenderson.com.
That's great. We'll put all the links in the show notes. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Allie.
How great was that, right? Once you understand the concept of a luxury belief and understand the effect that it has on people, especially the most vulnerable people, it's a game changer. I promised you that one day you're going to hear this in like broader culture and you'll go, oh, I remember hearing about that years ago on Allie's show. They didn't get me. I'm giving away copies of his book. Just tag me and tag Rob when you share it, and you'll be entered to win. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, like it, make sure you're subscribed, and leave a comment. I'd love to see what you think of the show. Okay, let's move on to the coaching segment. This was inspired by a tweet from the famous Dr. Henry Cloud, author of many, many books. And here was his tweet. I'll read it to you. It said, "In my experience, 2 words can change everything: create and allow. Most times, whatever state I'm in, I'm either creating it or allowing it to exist. If you look at the ways that we either create or allow a lot of misery and missed opportunities, the road back begins with one step: ownership. When you stop perceiving yourself as a victim who has no control over your time and energy, when you begin to own it, you have begun to get in charge." I love that. It's a quick reframe: creating versus allowing. Think about it. In most situations, we're either crafting our reality or letting things happen to us. And you know what? When we dive deep into how we're actively creating a reality, or we're feeling like victims, that we have no self-efficacy to change things, it all starts to click. The journey back to reclaiming our power, it kicks off with grabbing the reins of responsibility. Let's ditch the whole "I'm just a bystander in my own life" mindset. That's victim mentality thinking right there. One thing that I hope I've taught my boys really well is to never fall prey to victim mentality. It is something that if you view yourself as a victim in life, you will be. You won't advocate for yourself. You won't make sure that you're living the life that God has for you because you just go, there's nothing I can do about it. But the moment you start saying, I've got this, I'm the boss of my own time and energy, that's when the magic happens. That's when you truly start steering your own ship. And if you're thinking, but wait, God is steering my ship. Yes, I know. And I know you know that by now. When I'm speaking to you, it's a given. But sometimes we lean too hard into the thought that if God wants it to be, it will be. And we don't lift a finger. And we feel like we're a victim to our circumstances. When you're creating as opposed to just allowing things to happen in life, you're partnering with God. I wrote a whole book about this in Standing Strong. If you go to the Standing Strong part of my website, you can read 4 chapters for free. I want to bless you with that. But remember this, one thing you can do to remember to think in terms of creating versus allowing things to just happen is just put it on a Post-it note. What am I creating and what am I allowing in my life? What am I creating and what am I allowing? That will remind you and bring you back to this frame of reference. Because like Dr. Cloud said, when you stop thinking of yourself as a victim, that life is happening to you, when you start acting like you own it and you're responsible for it, that's where the magic happens. You can do this. I guarantee you're not a victim. You've got God inside of you. He will take good care of you, but you got to step out. You got to get going. Seriously, download those chapters of Standing Strong. I hope it really helps. Okay, recommendations this week. The app you need to have is the ChatGPT app. Now, you may not have gotten on the ChatGPT train. I get it, but I want you to download the app. I know it's on Apple. I don't know if it's on Android, because you will use it more than you use Google. You know how if you're looking for how to cook something, how to cook something is a nightmare because of all the ads and the slow websites. I just put, you can see if you're on YouTube, I just put, how do you cook wings? And it gives exactly the step-by-step for all the different ways, baking, grilling, frying, or air frying. Exactly what you need to know in a second, as opposed to Google, which is going to give you 10 different websites, all of them slow, all of them full of ads. I go to ChatGPT before Google now when I just want answers, like what does the research say about X, Y, and Z? And then, give me the research links, or how do I do this, or how do I do that? I just go to ChatGPT. It's so much easier. It's free. Download it. Give it a try for a week. Put it on the front of your phone and see if it doesn't make life so much easier. You know what makes life easier for me? The fact that you're here. How do you like that transition? I love that we get to have time together every week. I love how you invest in yourself. You invest in yourself because you know an investment in you is a gift to everyone that you're around. That's why you're here, learning something small, learning what's going on in society, learning what you need to know so you can lead well out in the world and you can lead the people who depend on you well. We have to stay educated. We have to stay on top of this. We have to make sure that we are on the forefront of trends so we can be a voice of reason and sanity and just positivity in the world, right? Because the truth is, God has not only created you to stand strong and bring something special and unique to this world, He's brought you here to bring some sanity in the world and to be a light in this world. So keep stepping up, keep showing up, and keep loving well, because the truth is you cannot break a woman who gets her strength from God. I love to get to coach and equip you every week. I'll be back with you next Monday, and I hope you have a great day. We're going to, do it again. Okay. Blah. YouTube is easy.